Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive. This week I talk about the Decipher edition of Star Trek role-playing games. This is a bit interesting in that there's a little bit of a bias in how they do their books. The player's guide is pretty much everything you need to build a character, with very, very little of the rules. Just the main little highlights in an appendix in the back. The narrator's guide, the GM's guide, is where all the rules for skill tests, combat, and everything else are found. I.e., not just the stuff that is normally reserved for GMs, like the fringe cases and such, but it is where all the combat rules, all the skill test rules are located. None of those are in the player's guide. So this gives the book a little bit of a interesting bias, in that it's pretty much saying players don't need to know the rules, they just need to know how to build their character. But sit back, relax, and enjoy as I talk about the Coda system in Star Trek, the role-playing game by Decipher. Do you ever see a system that on the surface it looks like another system, but when you actually go and look at it, it's something a little bit different? That is the Coda system. On the surface, if you just take a quick look, it looks like d20. And then you start digging in. The Coda system is a skill-based system. In essence, everything you do, there is a skill check and a target number for that. And you roll 2d6. If both die are 6s, then you will roll a third die. And that's the core of the system. Even combat is to make an attack, you roll 2d6, you add your skill in the combat ability to that die roll, and then that tells you if you hit, by whether it exceeds or is below the target's defense score. And that is pretty much the core of the system. It is ridiculously simple on the surface. Yes, there are all sorts of combat options. Aiming to add bonuses to your attacks. Charge, which lets you get a bonus to your attack after you move. And of course, complications and all that based on the situation that add or subtract to the target number. But for the most part, it's roll 2d6, add your skill. Does it equal or exceed the target? Yes? Good. You win. Experience points are awarded based on rolls. Successful rolls. And that's pretty much it. So, if you have a security officer who never gets to shoot, he's never really going to get as much experience, because his job determines what sorts of things he gets experience for. But that is the system, the core of the system. So let's talk about the slightly more complicated area of character creation and advancement. You know how I said that this system on the surface looks like the d20 system? Well, part of that is its 6 attributes. These 6 attributes are strength, intellect, agility, vitality, presence, perception. Hey, and most of these correspond to the classic d20 attributes of strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. They're a little different, but on the surface they look the same, and they're pretty much using sort of the uses that one would expect them in a d20 game, but they're not the same. They're subtle variants. The other thing it has in common is that each race gives modifiers to its attributes based on the race. While humans and Majorans, for example, have no modifiers, Betazoids get +1 presence, while Klingons get bonuses to strength and vitality, and penalties to intellect and perception. And it even has rules for mixed species, which I'm not going to go into at this time. That's one of those more advanced type things. Now then, how do you determine your starting attributes? There are 2 ways. You can use the classic random roll method, where you roll 2 6-sided dice 9 times and discard the lowest 3. Or you can use what's called the pick method. In this version, you start off with attributes at 10, 9, 7, 7, 5, and 4, and then you get to assign 8 additional points to those attribute scores, spreading them however you wish to assign the attributes. And pretty much the attributes do the 4 to 7 is average at no modifiers. 8 to 9 is a +1. 10 to 11 is a +2. 12 to 13 is +3, etc., etc. 3 is a -1. 2 is a -2. 0 to 1 is a -3. Yes, you can technically have a 0 in an attribute. But if your method ends up with you getting a 0, you can scrap all 6 of your attributes and try again. That's how you generate your attributes. Quick, simple, a little bit inelegant, but it's, like I said, it's sort of a retro feeling RPG in how it's done. Now, how do you pick your skills and all that? Well, you of course pick your species, you pick your profession. Your profession gives you a set of abilities. But, starting off, you do your personal development. Your personal development is basically where you grew up before going to whatever set up your profession. And these follow a formula of you pick 1 skill at a +2. You pick 3 skills at +1. And then you get an edge, which is one of the advantages based on that. Edges are effectively their positive traits. Then, once you've picked your profession, your personal skills, you pick the stuff relating to your profession. And, the professions: diplomat, merchant, mystic, rogue, scientist, soldier. Starship Command Officer, Starship Operations Officer, Operations, Security, Starship Science. Those are all the some of the various professions. And what you do is you pick what you are in that. For instance, let's say you decide you're a mystic. You could be an ascetic, a cleric, a mendicant, or a shaman. Or you are a Starfleet Command Officer, a basic commander, a representative, a manager, flight control. Those are all subdivisions there. So, like, you decide you want to be a helmsman navigator. You get a list of skills at that level. Modified, of course, by any skills that you'd gotten from your personal development. You get a pick 5 of +1 to any of your profession skills. And then you get an edge related to that profession. Like, a helmsman gets bold, confident, fast on your feet, sense of direction, or unyielding. And bam, you have your character. Now, there are certain skills called skill groups that, like engineering. It's not, oh look, I've got a rank in engineering, I can do everything. Engineering is a bunch of small skills. And every time you get a rank in engineering, you can pick to put a rank to one of these skills. Engineering is propulsion, structural, and systems. So, if you have 3 picks in engineering from all your stuff, you can put those into propulsion, structural, systems. So you could make +3 to propulsion, or +1 to all 3 sub-skills. It doesn't really matter how you do it, just as long as you spend all those picks. But advancement is where the system gets interesting. Every time you accrue 1,000 experience points, you gain an advancement. And when you gain an advancement, you get 5 picks. Now, what these picks are, each choice you make costs a certain number of picks. Adding 1 to your health, or adding 1 to a non-favored attribute. Your profession gives you a favored attribute, and then you pick another favored attribute. But adding +1 to your health, or +1 to a non-favored attribute, costs all 5 of your picks. Adding +1 to a favorite attribute only costs 4. Gaining a new professional ability or upgrading an existing one costs 3 picks. Now, each profession has a set of abilities. These are... You don't start off with one of these, but it's like, for example, the scientist. The tier 1 abilities are area of expertise. Even though you receive extensive education, you tend to focus on an area. You choose 1 science skill and specialty, such as life science, exobiology. And skill picks made during advancement increase the skill ranks in the chosen skill by +2, rather than the standard +1. Focus. Scientists learn to keep their cool even in times of stress. They don't get penalties for distractions. Secretive. You know how to keep your mouth shut. You add your intellect modifier to your willpower to resist someone trying to make you talk. And those are some of just the basic abilities. Okay, you also can add +1 to your courage, +1 to a non-favored reaction for 3 picks, +1 to your renown, your fame, how well you're known. Kirk had a high renown. Picard had a high renown. Barclay didn't have a high renown. You can add +1 to a non-professional skill. All those for 2 points. You can gain a new specialty for an existing skill, professional or non-professional, or add +1 to a professional skill for 1 pick. So, in essence, these are all the short of it. You gain advancements every 1,000 XP you accumulate. So every time you do 1,000 XP of stuff relating to your profession, you gain an advancement. You make your 5 picks. And that is the long and the short of the Decipher system for Star Trek. Next week, I'm going to be talking about Changeling the Dreaming. Until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.